Hello and welcome to Rowing Chat. It's a brand new year, 2015, and we're really happy to be back with you again. Rowing Chat is a podcast for people who enjoy the sport of rowing, and today I'm joined by Peter Mallory. Peter, welcome to Rowing Chat.
I am so pleased to be here, Rebecca.
Tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and your personal journey through the sport of rowing.
Well, I don't know if I should be proud or a little squinchy about the fact that before I started my rowing career at prep school, I actually dressed up as a rower for Halloween when I was probably 11 or 12. So my father had rowed, my grandfather had rowed, and my 56-year journey in the sport started with coxing, moved on to rowing, coaching, doing research, writing books, and I'm still at it 56 years later.
That's amazing. So why rowing? What is it about this sport that has so engaged you?
That's a great question, Rebecca. I try every day to get up and make the world a better place in one form or fashion or another. And I've done a lot of things. I've taught school at several levels, from elementary school up to maximum security prison. I have coached several sports, but it just seems that with rowing, I have a bigger lever with which to move the world than when I've taught art studio or algebra or whatever. So I keep returning to this.
Give us an anecdote about this, the effects of your big lever that moves the world. When I'm out in public at a big regatta or something like that, or maybe at some sort of reunion, I have had many, many, many instances of people walking up to me and saying, "Peter, you changed my life. The things that I learned when I was with you have impacted me in terms of my lifestyle, how well I succeed at work, whether I'm a good parent, etc." And while I should be bursting with pride when I hear that, many times I'm going, "Who are you?" in my little head. And luckily, my wife has learned to recognize that moment of panic, and so she walks right up and says, "Hi, I'm Susan Mallory, and how do you know my husband?" And that usually gets me out of the jam. It sounds like an awesome partnership. I think I need to learn from Susan. So we ask readers and listeners each week we do a podcast what questions they'd like to ask you. And the first one is actually one of my own, thinking about your role when you're coaching. With a new crew, what is the first thing that you look at?
Well, Rebecca, the answer would be different every time. You just look and something catches your eye. I have wondered to myself, if I look hard at any crew, even an Olympic champion crew, I can see plenty of things that, if I could, I would change. And some of those, if I had 1 or 2 years or whatever, I would make an effort to change them. And I'm not sure why I pick one thing or another, but I follow my gut. And it may be it just could be almost anything. Though my general philosophy about rowing is that even though pulling hard is important, it's how you pull, and as far as the pull through is concerned, and the recovery is really the key. If you can be relaxed on the recovery, if you can make the transition from pull through to recovery, from recovery to pull through, so that you are relaxed and comfortable and feel confident, then the boat will respond and it'll be easier to pull on the next one. I never have to, what's the right word? I never have to hesitate. Just something comes out of my mouth and I just want to trust, whatever my instinct is. And so there.
So that's a great answer for an experienced coach, but some of our listeners will be just starting out on their coaching career. What guidance would you give them with a new crew?
Well, to go back to the words the words and teachings of Steve Fairburn, and actually going back to a conversation that I had with one of my rowers this morning, there are the details, hand heights and how you grip the oar and what you're doing and what the body mechanics are. All of those little details are fine, but I think especially when you just start out, you want to look at the forest and not the trees. You want people to just do what comes naturally. There are lots of examples and lots of people, lots of coaches for 200 years have said that people naturally want to row well, and it's only coaches that screw them up. So don't screw them up. Let them enjoy themselves. Let them express themselves, and slowly but surely guide them to being, more effective and more uniform if it's in a boat with more than one athlete.
That's a great answer, and in fact was illustrated for me at the weekend with some complete beginners who we were starting off. And of course, like many clubs, we start them on the ergo. Normally, people tend to start by getting people to sit at the finish, and then they get them to row with arms only, and then they teach them how to rock their body forwards, and then they bend their knees and come up the slide. And I decided just to switch that all around and to start with the leg drive. So I had them roll forwards to the catch, and I said, just leave your arms straight. Now push with your legs. And they push, and I said, now come back, bend your knees again, and push again. And just started by teaching the leg drive because, as you say, coaches screw them up. And I think the part of the stroke that is often the hardest to grasp for a newcomer is the finish, the feathering, the transition from power to recovery.
Mm-hmm. That definitely strikes a chord. I think, I'm also reminded of the fact that if you put a shell in the water by the dock and you look at it, it'll be balanced. And I keep telling my rowers, if the boat is not balanced when you're rowing, it's not the shell's fault, it's your fault. Because if we could just get rid of you, the boat would be perfectly balanced. So remember that. Remember that it's your job not to make a mistake, and not to give some sort of negative input to the boat. Let the boat tell you what it wants. It will be giving you feedback all the time. Listen to it.
So true. Now, Stephen from the University Barge Club in Philadelphia has sent in a question. What aspect of rowing do you find the hardest for rowers to grasp and implement?
I think I'd go back to the forest and trees analogy. It is so, during my research for my major work, the sport of rowing, I probably read in excess of 200 how to row type books. Some of them more than 150 years old, and some of them that had just come out. And virtually every single one breaks the rowing cycle down into component parts. And the trouble is that if you think of them as component parts, and Rebecca, you just described, well, we're just going to isolate the legs and work on the legs. when you break up things into component parts, it's very hard to integrate them back together. And that is the great challenge. It's hard, rowing is hard and it's complicated, and we do want to try to simplify it, and there's lots of ways to try to do that. But the hardest thing I find is to get a new rower, or even an experienced rower that I'm seeing for the first time, is to get them to integrate everything and realize that their job is to put the oar in and have it accelerate to the finish and then release. And that goes straight back to Fairburn again. Fairburn is the basis for almost every good rowing, good coaching technique in the 20th century.
Since you've mentioned him, would you just give a potted history of who Steve Fairburn is and what he did?
Well, Steve was he was an Australian. He was, I think, the fifth of six brothers, something like that. I'm sorry, I haven't really, it's been a few months since I've done all the research. That went from Geelong School in Australia back when Australia was, this is in 1885, back when, actually 1883, back when Australia really was a wilderness, and went to Jesus College, Cambridge, basically coached himself and his team from the first day of his freshman year, implemented a huge number of innovative things that he may not have originated. He gave credit to professional rowers. He gave credit to his predecessor at Jesus College. I think it's pretty hard not to presume that he was also influenced by Ned Hanland, a professional rower from Canada, who was competing in London the same time that Fairburn arrived. Anyway, he revolutionized British rowing. He participated. He actually began a several-year string of victories for Cambridge over Oxford, but because when you row, and when you row well, everybody can see you because there you are out in public, and because several of his Cambridge teammates also rowed for Leander Club, the word got out as to what to do. And when he left, Cambridge eventually kind of lost sight of the old Fairburn, the truths that he'd taught, but they had spread to Oxford, and it went on and on and on. Anyway, Steve spent close to 20 years working in the family business in Australia before he returned to coach at Jesus College at the beginning of the 20th century. He coached for almost around 30 years, and again was one of the most successful coaches in all of history. And the great thing that he did was he was so he was so entertaining in the way that he wrote, the way that he made rowing literally front page news in all the major newspapers for decades. And he has incited followers for now more than a century. He also is he was also vilified by all the people that he disagreed with. The great Orthodox majority that he was saying no, there's a better way, reacted very negatively against him. But it's so, especially now a century removed, it is very, very entertaining to see when passion, when rowing incited a passion that would put it on the front page of the Times of London, all the major newspapers.
That's certainly something that modern coaches can aspire to, but I suspect that few of us will be able to achieve.
Yeah.
Now, moving on to a little focus on the communication between crew and coach. What tips do you have for getting crews to understand what you want them to do?
Well, trying to describe proper rowing technique is like trying to grasp smoke. There is so much that seems metaphysical. I remember when I was a college undergraduate many years ago, my coach, I remember having a conversation, or actually listening to a conversation that he was having, saying that basically some people get it and some people don't. And the inference was you couldn't teach it, that you had to be born with this magical boat moving gene in your, in your body. I don't believe that's true. I think you can teach it. Some people learn it easier than others, but if there's a particular issue that you have to, that you're trying to get through to somebody, you just have to keep describing it in 11 different or 15 different or 37 different or 500 different ways. And sometimes there's all sorts of things that you can do. You can put them on the ergometer and row beside them, or literally manipulate them. One of the things that we do at my current coaching position at Loyola Marymount University is we encourage a dialogue within the boats. We stop fairly often on our technique rows, and some of the more experienced guys try to explain to the person that's having an issue in their own terms. They're in the boat, coach, I'm in the launch. I'm not experiencing whatever the problem is. The teammates are. And so we just try to keep going over and over and over in different ways, finding new things, finding new opportunities. If someone is having trouble rushing his slide and he's up in the bow seat and he's having, he's making life hell on the people in the stern, sometimes the thing to do is to put him in the stern and force him to accept the responsibility of setting a proper, a proper rhythm. It's just, you have to be persistent. The only other thing that I say is to the guys, I say, the boat is talking to you. I eventually will get sick and tired of telling you to roll up early or whatever it happens to be. Release clean, hold your knees down, whatever it is. I'll eventually, some little voice inside me that I'm not even aware of will finally say, hey, listen, I've told Bobby 1 million times to do this. It's not my fault anymore. He's never going to get it. So I'm going to move on to something else. But I said, the boat will never do that. The boat has infinite patience. And so if you're messing up, if you're checking the boat at some, going into the catch, it will never tire from reminding you by reacting negatively. So listen to the boat, put yourself into the, try to imagine that, what it would be like to row with you, listen to your teammates, listen to your coach, try to, another good teaching technique, pretty standard stuff, is explain something to them and say, okay, explain it back to me. Describe what you're supposed to do, or demonstrate the bad way, now demonstrate the good way. And, just ways to try to get through to this into this rower's little pea brain. And it's so hard. It's the hardest thing that we have to do.
That's a very, very true summary of reality, but thank you for great tips there. Now, Jack from the University of York Boat Club in the UK asks, could you give me one tip to make me a better competitor on race day and when training?
Okay. My one tip is, especially if you're in a crew boat, if you're in a boat where you have at least one teammate and you are trying to do your best or have your boat do its best in the next piece or during the next race, don't try to win the race for yourself. don't try to win the race for your teammate. You can't win that race. You can't win that piece by yourself. What you should do instead is go, what can I do to make my double partner, the other 7 guys in my 8, whatever it is, what can I do to make the boat, make them more comfortable so they'll win the race for me? And if it's an 8, and if you have 8 people with that thinking, what can I do on the next stroke to make my teammates feel better? Can I enhance their surge through the water? Can I make sure that I'm not rushing my slide, which is going to negatively impact them? If I can just make them, if I'm helping in some way to make the boat balance better, if I can make them more comfortable, they'll win the race for me. So that's sort of turning, all of us, when there's 400 meters to go, we're going, oh my God, what can I do to win this race? We're 3 seats behind. What can I do to win those 3 seats? Don't do that. Go, what can I do to help Billy and Bobby and Johnny and Jimmy that are ahead of me, or it's Sally and Susie and Molly and whatever? What can I do so that they'll win the race for me? Does that make sense?
Very interesting perspective. Now, John from Falcon Rowing Club in Oxford, also in the UK, asks, how important is it for a coxswain to have actually done rowing?
I have 2 Olympic medalist coxswains that came out of programs of mine. One of them was an excellent rower and actually was a national champion, U.S. champion rower back when they had flyweight women's rowing. The other one never coxed. I don't think that it's required. I think it's a good idea, and most coxswains, I have had most coxswains learn to row during most of my career. I don't do that now in my college program. I think it's a good thing. I think that a coxswain who becomes a coach, I think, misses something if he or she has not experienced the rowing, rowing a race himself or herself. But you know what? You go with what you got. If a person is a coxswain and wants to get better, I would recommend they learn how to row, but I don't think it's a requirement.
Great stuff. Now, Morty from Emder Rowing Verein in Emden in Germany asks, why do some athletes row both port and starboard rather than specialize?
This is a choice that a coach or a club or a team has to make. Are you going to randomly or make some effort to assign someone to either port or starboard and leave them there? Or are you going to force, encourage/force them to row both sides? It is my experience that, let's say you are beginning, you're starting a novice team. It is my experience that they will learn faster and they will learn better if you switch them from port to starboard and back every workout, every other workout. And that seems counterintuitive. I think it's because in those opening weeks, they have to go, okay, where am I? All right, which hand is my inside hand? Which hand is my outside hand? What do they have separate, different roles. I have to think hard about what those roles are, and I have to make it happen right. And I think that's part of, learning how to row well. It's so easy because we repeat the stroke so obsessively, hundreds of times per workout, it just becomes second nature and you stop thinking about stuff. I think the more that you really, truly, intellectually understand what you're supposed to do, the better you will do it. So, and I can't imagine, how awful it would be for a coach to go, oh my God, I only have 3 ports and 5 starboards. Every single one of the people that I have coached, I have insisted that they row both sides. And also, I can't imagine being a rower going, God, I've got the 5th best erg on the team, but I'm also the 5th best portman, so I didn't make the 8. That would be a real tragedy. I think there's plenty of advantages to go to be ambidextrous, and I can't imagine why anyone, everybody doesn't do it.
So, if I were a specialist, does specializing on one side or the other pose any problems?
Absolutely. There are some people that have a particular physiological abnormality that might make it better for them to row on port or row on starboard. But for the most part, rowing, sweep rowing is an asymmetrical exercise. It forces your back, it gives strains in your back to one side more than the other, or whatever. If you are rowing both sides and alternating back and forth, at least it seems reasonable to me that you are minimizing that issue of excess back strain. And there in Britain there is a strong, actually in a number of countries, there's a strong feeling that young rowers should only scull, that you should not introduce sweep rowing until later when they're more physically mature. And part of the reason is because of this asymmetricality. Well, the one way that you can minimize asymmetricality in sweep rowing is rowing both sides on a regular basis.
That's very clear. Thank you. Now we are moving on to a message from our sponsor. Is Mike Spracklin the most notorious coach of the 20th century? This quietly spoken man has a cupboard full of trophies and Olympic medals, and a reputation for driving fully grown men to weeping frustration and anger. His coaching success has been delivered in the UK, USA, Canada, and now Russia. Find out what rowing technique Mike advocates for fast boats and the psychology he uses to push his crews hard in our special offer bundle of an ebook, Mike Spracklin's Rowing Technique, plus the DVD, Spracklin's Rowing Philosophy, filmed by Kevin Light before he left Canada. Both are available together in the Row Perfect UK store for a special price of £27 and 1 penny. Follow the link on the screen or search for Mike Spracklin inside the rowperfect.co.uk online shop. So back with Peter Mallory, my guest this month on Rowing Chat. We have a question now from Kent, who's from the San Diego Rowing Club in San Diego, USA, and he asks, can you maintain your 90% win record in your current university coaching position?
Kent is, I wrote a pair for several years with Kent, and so he's a good friend. And my answer to him is probably not. Luckily, my win-loss record up until I returned to coaching a couple of years ago was in excess of 95%. So I've got a little bit of time left. But the difficulty is that nowadays it's in most rowing it's all about bodies. It's a meat market, it's a arms race, however you want to say it. And in my small college program, I am working very, very hard to recruit more and more experienced athletes and to recruit new people out of the dormitories. But there are a number of just excellent coaches and excellent programs in our immediate neighborhood in Southern California, but throughout the United States, that just have so many more bodies, so many more dedicated athletes, and have done such a terrific job of producing big groups year after year, and they graduate a bunch, but they get a bunch more in. And right now, I am outmanned. But so even though my very best guys are superb and just getting better, I've had trouble. I've had trouble. Actually, in 2 years, I have not won an 8 race. My teams have not won an 8 race because I've had trouble finding and putting into one boat 8 quality guys in order to be able to be competitive with the people that have 2 8s and 3 8s and 4 8s worth of good men. So Kent, I am well aware that, but it's not all about winning, and I won't be able to brag about 90% for a great deal longer, and that's okay. I am making a difference in the lives of my children, and I think of my rowers as my children, and I am making the world a better place most days. Some days I go to bed going, well, I could do without, let's hope that tomorrow's better than today was. But today so far has been a good day.
Peter, I want to move on to a different part of your rowing career and ask you about your writing. What was the inspiration behind the Sport of Rowing book?
Well, that's an interesting question. When it was something like 9 or 10 years ago, my children went off to college, and I had been coaching my stepdaughter, rowing beside her in singles for a couple of years, and we'd been training twice a day. And when she went off to college, my wife Susan said, "Gee, I think you're going to need something to fill up your days. You're gonna have a lot of free time now." And I had, some years before that, I had written a memoir called An Out-of-Boat Experience, and I had really enjoyed that, and I'd gotten a lot of positive feedback about it, and was still getting emails about that book. So I figured, well, maybe I'll write another book, and I ended up picking up a rowing manual from Great Britain, written in the year 1897, which had been a present from a friend, and I thought, geez, this is going to be really entertaining. It's going to be so quaint, and they're going to be so, behind the times, and they're not going to really know it. It'd be great to see how stupid they were 100 years ago. Well, I got 15 pages into this book, and I went, holy cow, this is great stuff. This is well written. It's on point. You could go out and see crews that, are just as, that what they're saying, what this in this book is just as relevant today as it must have been 100 years ago. And I started to ask myself, how could this possibly be? How could we have gone a century without a whole lot changing at all? And so one thing led to another. I tried to answer that question, and it took me 2,500 pages to do it.
Economy of words obviously not being your strong suit.
No, this is true.
So The Sport of Rowing was 4 volumes in which you document the differing rowing techniques taught in different countries around the world and by different coaches over time. Is that a fair summary?
Yes, over time. In other words, and how one, it was following sort of a genealogy of all this. Where, if we see Mike Spracklin, and by the way, I say to our listeners, listen to Mike Spracklin. I don't think he's the most controversial coach of the 20th century Steve Fairburn was. But Mike is a student of Fairburn, and just one of the nicest men. He's never made me cry, let's put it that way. But anyway, going back, I was, if Mike Spracklin is what he is, how did he become, how did his technique evolve, and what were his predecessors, and moving back and moving back and moving back. So I wanted to see the evolution as it went over the decades.
That's a great way to start. But obviously, you went back quite a long way.
It turns out, I mean, I didn't go back to the triremes and all that kind of stuff, but rowing during the Middle Ages had been an artisan profession, especially in Great Britain and in all of the great harbors of the British Empire, or of former British possessions, which means New York and Sydney and Melbourne and Auckland and Hong Kong and whatever. There were watermen, professional watermen, and it was a lower class, hard, dangerous job. And then all of a sudden, some kids at Eton College in Great Britain decide, hey, this might be a fun thing to do. Well, that's a pretty amazing story how that happened, in terms of sports, sociology, etc. Well, anyway, and that was around, they have a specific date in 1793 when supposedly they track everything back to. Well, that means it's a little over 200 years ago, and from this activity of Eton College students, they quickly went to Oxford and Cambridge. The Oxford and Cambridge people kept on rowing, etc. And literally within a couple of decades, there was a burgeoning sport, competitive sport, with private clubs, with university teams, with secondary school teams, and they, from 1793, by the 1820s, they pretty much, there were people that had figured it out, that were rowing well in ways that we could relate to. You could go back, and if you could go back in a time machine and could row with some of these people on the Tideway in London Rowing Club or whatever, in 1825, you go, okay, I can, I understand this. This is, we can have a conversation. This is good stuff.
That's amazing to think, isn't it? That we could definitely get in a boat and row with these people. Yes, the equipment will be different, but fundamentally, they could get in a boat and row with us too.
Right. Absolutely. And they would be absolutely gobsmacked at, oars, oarlocks, and carbon fiber oars and sliding seats and all the things that we have done since then, and boats that you could actually pick out of the water instead of haul out of the water. They'd be astonished at all of that, but they'd go, okay, this is rowing, I understand this.
Yeah. So are copies of your book still available for purchase, Peter?
There was a very, very limited run, but there are sets that are still available at the River and Rowing Museum in Henley in England. You could contact them or visit them and still find sets of the softcover edition, and they're actually, I think, very reasonable. I think they're 150 pounds, and considering it's 2,500 pages, 4 huge volumes, on a price per word basis, I think that's pretty good. It is a special. It is, I am very proud of that work. There are also a few of the collector editions, hardcover in a slipcase, signed, dedicated, numbered, etc., that have been held back by the publisher, River and Rowing Museum. And if you were interested in that, they are asking for a healthy financial contribution, which in the United States is tax deductible, and it is $5,000. But given that there were only 300 sets ever made, they will gain in value, and I believe it's a good investment. I worked 7 hard years to make sure it's worth $5,000 and more, and so that is possible. And someone could contact you, Rebecca, or Row Perfect UK, could contact River and Rowing Museum, or contact me if they were interested in such things. Yes. And there are a couple of libraries in the United States, at least, which deserve a copy, a set of these books that don't have them, and that includes Harvard. I think Penn has one, Yale has one, Washington has one, Stanford, but there's some big programs here. It's part of the library at Henley Royal Regatta. It's in some very prestigious places, but it's not in every one. And if someone were to donate something to a place like Harvard University, I'm sure they would. They would definitely go to rowing heaven when they finally move on.
Fabulous. Now, the copies of the book actually are also available for sale on the Row Perfect UK store.
And thank you for reminding me. Yes.
Now,
when we only had 2 outlets to buy the sport of rowing. One was www.row2k.com in the United States, and it was Row Perfect UK for much of the rest of the world. And I'm very grateful to you, Rebecca, for all that you have done to help get the word out.
Oh, thank you. Will you be writing new chapters to the sport of rowing in future, Peter?
The thing is, I could imagine. No, I really can't. As I sort of alluded to, not a whole lot has changed in 200 years. They've been, certain things have gone in and out of fashion. Some, for a few years, everybody seemed to be laying back a lot, and then everybody's sitting up, and then they're laying back again. But everything's, people might say, "Oh my goodness, Ratzeburg style is way different from the East German style." Not really, if you really drill down. And so I think I've said it all. Now, the thing that I use, the reason it took 2,500 pages was that I illustrate all the great crews that have formed the various movements over the history of our competitive sport. And there will still be plenty more great stories. More oral history to be collected, and I'm not sure that will rest on my shoulders. So I have no plans to add chapters.
So that question was from Mitch in New York. We now have one from Mike, who's from the Sagamore Rowing Association in Oyster Bay in New York, USA, and he asks, "Did Steve Fairburn teach a sculler's entry?"
Well. That's sort of an interesting question. The problem is we have to define those things, and there's actually sort of, this is one of those issues that is kind of, that I talked about before, that's like trying to grasp smoke. A sculler's entry generally means scullers don't talk about sculler's entries, sweep rowers do. And what sweep rowers tend to mean when they say a sculler's entry is that us tough, real men or real women sweep rowers with a big oar, we come up and we bang the hell out of the catch and just wail on the on the oar handle. Whereas scullers, those sissies with little teeny oars, they come up and they place the oar in and then surge through to the end. So a sculler's entry, usually when it's when it's being used, is used in a pejorative sense. It's used as, I wouldn't be, scullers are sissies, and they have a sculler's entry because they're not big and macho like we are. And I happen to believe that there's only one good way to row, and that's true of sculling and sweep rowing, and that is that you do need to have the sensitivity of a sculler. In an 8, things happen faster. In a quad, things happen faster than they do in a single. There are lots of adjustments you have to make, but you basically have to place the oar in and then find a way, going back to Steve Fairburn, to have the water boiling aft. You have to send those puddles as far and as fast as you can. Where Fairburn comes in, and this is something that Mike Spracklin also uses in his contemporary coaching, is that is the question of, when do you actually place the oar in during the stroke cycle? Do you do it at the end of the recovery, which would cause a backsplash, a splash off the back of the blade towards the bow? Or do you row the blade in? In other words, your blade catches up to the speed of the water at the beginning of the pull through and enters with either a neutral splash or a front splash, and continues to accelerate on from there. That is kind of that is a choice that coaches and rowers have to make. Are you going to backsplash and ka-chunk in, make the catch the end of the recovery, or are you going to row the blade in and make it the beginning of the pull through? And Steve Fairburn was the second. He had his people row the blade in at the beginning of the pull through, and he loved to he described something called the Jesus bell note, where if you actually slice in such a way, carve your way into the water as you pick up speed, and you actually hit the water at speed, what you will do is create as you enter, you will create a vacuum behind the oar. You will carve a hole in the water right behind the oar, and as that hole collapses, the water slaps to the back onto the back of the blade, and you hear this ka-chunk, which sounds like, has been described as sounding like a bell being rung, and it was called the Jesus bell note in memory of Steve's home club and the club that he coached at for a good part of his coaching career, and that is Jesus College, Cambridge.
That's a very full answer, thank you. Now, you briefly touched earlier on your memoir on rowing. Can you tell us a little bit more about your autobiography? It's called An Out-of-Boat Experience, or God is a Rower and He Rows Like Me. And I'm right now looking at the Amazon.com page. And Peter, there is one new copy available for the princely sum of $2,585.58. I do hope it's you that's selling that one. But of course, we also know that it's just recently been published in Kindle for $17.75.
As I've said, I try to make the world a better place every day, and I've certainly gotten a great deal of satisfaction out of rowing, out of writing Out of Boat Experience, because I think my experience as an athlete has a lot of lessons to teach to other people, and to give you a 10-cent version, I was not a truly great rower. I was what I tend to term a near great rower. I always had friends, any number of friends, 2, 3, 4, whatever, that were better than I was. I was never, ever the best. And that was enormously frustrating to me because I tried so hard, but I had to learn humility. I had to learn patience. I had to learn all sorts of things. And I also had to learn how to row because I had to teach myself because the way that I was taught just didn't work for me. And I sort of misinterpreted some of the things that my coaches had said to me, etc. Anyway, I try to make it fun. I'm told, people say, people have emailed me and said, I was doing great. And, then I turned the page and I practically coughed up the coffee I was drinking because I laughed it through my nose. And for the most part, the jokes are on me. And I think that's the way it should be. The reason that I brought out the third edition very recently is that thanks to the internet and thanks to Google searches and things like that, and thanks to the ability to have a scanner in my house, I could put many, many, many more images into the book as a Kindle than I ever had when it was a print book 15 years ago. And I've been lucky enough to be friends with a lot of very nice, very successful people, and they are the ones that make the book, as far as I'm concerned.
Do you have a plan to write another book?
I don't mean to be a tease, but I've been talking to a very good friend of mine who has a story that ought to be told, she is an important she has been important to rowing history, and how, whether we're going to go forward and how it might be structured, whether I would ghostwrite it and it would be in her voice, or whether we would collaborate. The book, assuming we do go forward, the book will tell us how it should be once we start collecting stuff. So I'm hoping that will be the case, but I don't want to announce anything until I have a firm agreement with this particular person.
Peter, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. It's been delightful getting an insight into your world of rowing. Let the listeners know where they can connect with you and read your stuff online.
Okay, my website is www.rowingevolution.com, and my email is pmallory, MALLORY, @rowingevolution.com. I make an effort to answer every email. You all are part of my family, the rowing family that has, supported me and kept me going for 56 years. And I am, happy to give what I can whenever I can.
That's great. We have a prize this month, as always, which is given away to everybody who is subscribed to the Row Perfect UK newsletter list. And this month, the prize is a copy of Peter's book. Thank you very much, Peter, for donating. So this is Peter's autobiography, his memoir on rowing. We welcome comments and suggestions for new episodes of Rowing Chat, or if you have further questions from this episode, please do so at info@rowperfect.co.uk. That's info@rowperfect.co.uk. Past episodes are available at rowperfect.co.uk/rowing chat. You can follow us on Twitter @rowperfect or Facebook Row Perfect UK, or subscribe to our feed in iTunes, SoundCloud or YouTube. Just search for Rowing Chat. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review and share this with your clubmates, which will help other rowers get more enjoyment from their rowing. For more information about Row Perfect UK and its educational services for coaches, coxswains and athletes, go to rowperfect.co.uk.